Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be picking up where we left off last week. Last week we left on mean arterial pressure, but we're going to continue with hypertension. So, there are several stages of hypertension per the AHA. Normal is considered 120, under 120 systolic, and anything under 80 for diastolic. Elevated is between 120 to 129, systolic, diastolic doesn't change here. Stage 1 is 130 to 139, and it has a change in the diastolic range from 80 to 89. Stage 2 is anything 140 or higher, or 90 higher for the diastolic. Hypertensive crisis is anything higher than 180 systolic, and then higher than 120 is diastolic. Now, an important thing to keep in mind is that patients aren't diagnosed with hypertension until it is consistently elevated. Just because someone comes in with a reading of 140 over 98 does not automatically mean that they are hypertensive. They need multiple repeat readings of an elevated blood pressure for them to be even considered hypertensive, okay? Orthostatic vital signs. It's when we check blood pressures in 3 different positions, and the patient population that we check these vital signs on are patients that we suspect have a volume depletion, such as dehydration or hemorrhaging, like they're bleeding out. If they have hypertension and they're taking antihypertensives, and if they report falling or dizziness, syncope, all that stuff. So how do we check it, right? I said we check it in 3 positions, and the 3 positions are supine, so when they're laying flat, when they're sitting up in high Fowlers, and standing up, okay? So what defines a positive orthostatic? It's when the blood pressure drops in the systolic greater than or equal to more than 20 millimeters of mercury with a change in the position. So if the supine is sitting, it goes from 110 to 90, that's a positive orthostatic. Or if you have a diastolic drop that's greater than 10. Okay. So this is it's not and. You don't need to be systolic and diastolic both dropping to be considered orthostatic. It only needs to be one, okay? So when you're reading the case study questions and they show you 2 different blood pressures, just try to catch an eye out if you see any keywords like feeling dizzy or low blood pressure, and you see the numbers change by this amount, okay, respectively. Okay. Safety, I'll briefly touch on this because at a intro to nursing school level, you don't need to know this too specifically. I think the most important one is fires, that you just need to know the PASS acronym. But other than that, this was more important in peds, where I got tested on this a little bit more. Okay, now we're going to go into hygiene. So we need to assess the patient's physical limitations, health practices, and emotional needs. And there are many factors that apply to a patient's ability to provide hygiene for themselves. It's one of those holistic types of things that we need to consider, right? Just like how healthcare is holistic, this is also holistic, right? So some factors are like social patterns, personal preference, health beliefs and motivation, personal preference, social economic factors, a very big one, cultural variables, and physical limitations. So, if a patient has a disability, it may be harder for them to practice certain types of hygiene, or if, they have depression and they just really can't get out of bed in the morning, or for example, if they have like osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, it's just hard for them to get going. They need some extra time to do these LDAs, or ADLs, sorry, these activities of daily living. Like we need to be aware of that, right? We can't just be like, oh yeah, just brush your teeth, to a patient that's like, quadriplegic, right? Like they may need some extra help, or with some other devices or technology to help them with that, right? Okay. Hand washing technique, this is like probably the number 1 most important thing that's going to be drilled into your head as a nursing student, because like every time you go into clinical or like a simulation, there's just going to be like, wash your hands. So when can you use soap versus the sanitizer? The pretty common like rule of thumb is you can gel in and out unless it's a contact precaution like C. diff, like contact plus. And if your hands are soiled, you have to use soap and water. So like blood, bodily fluids. Basically, if you can see like visible, you know, like your hands being soiled, you should probably use soap and water. Delegation. Now, this is probably one of like the NCLEX's most testable things, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And initially, when this was taught in nursing school at this level, this is the first semester of nursing school for me. Delegation. You have plenty of time to practice this and learn about it, and they reiterate it in every year. But basically, things that can be delegated to a CNA. A lot of things are like activities of daily living. Be careful with vital signs because it depends on your hospital's policy and specimen collection. It needs to be hospital specific. Feeding patients without swallowing precautions, it can also vary by hospital because at my current hospital, CNAs can feed patients with swallowing precautions. So all these things can like vary. And the person that's ultimately responsible for completion is the nurse. A general guideline to go by is the acronym like TAPE. Anything that needs teaching, like the first round of teaching, that has to be the nurse. CNAs can follow up and like reinforce teaching, but the first round of teaching has to be the nurse. A from the acronym is assessment. You, the nurse, have to be the one who doing the assessment. The CNA is not allowed to do any assessment. So you have to interpret their blood pressure, interpret their wound care, their skin care. Like you have to interpret what that means and what they're at risk for. P, planning, right? It's you gotta be the one writing the care plan. They can't. The CNA doesn't write the care plan. And E, I believe, is also for education, which is similar to teaching. Okay, PPE. Now, the donning steps are gown, mask, face shield, or like goggles, and then gloves. And taking them off, it is glove, goggles, so these get switched, then gown, then your mask, okay? Follow the CDC steps when you're being tested, if unless your professor has talked about it differently. But the easy trick I used to remember what is always going to be last and always going to be taken off first is gloves. It's always dirtiest thing first that you take off. The gloves is always dirtiest, so you always take that off last. And then I use the acronym like GEGM, like GEGM, to remember because I just think goggles as eyewear. That works for me, but however it works for you can, you know, however it helps you remember. Also, I know that like this is like the step-by-step accurate way to take it off, but in the hospital you may just see some nurses removing the gown and gloves together by just pulling at the front of the plastic gown. That works too, and that's the way I've always done it because to me it doesn't make sense to remove my gloves, expose my hands, and then touch the face shield and then pinch the top of like the gown or the back of the gown where it's technically considered clean. Like that doesn't make sense to me. So I just remove it all in one go. Okay, like I said before, this set of slides was made by like a previous TA, but I made this addition to help clarify airborne versus droplet. So droplet, I like to think of the mnemonic pimp because I like to think of Snoop Dogg songs, Drop It Like It Hot. I'm really aging myself here, but when you think of pimp, you want to think of pertussis, influenza, meningitis, and pneumonia, okay? And droplets are bigger molecules than airborne, okay? So that's why a surgical mask is good enough for this droplet precautions, okay? Airborne diseases are a bit smaller in size, and these are the measles, TBs, and varicella. And you think of On Air with MTV, like the 90s TV show. They're on air, right? Now, you need an N95 with a negative pressure room and a door closed at all times, right? You need an antechamber to even get in here. Now, the trick I used to remember it is, I'm like, oh my god, which one is the N95 and which one is a droplet mask? Or just a regular mask? I think of airborne. Say the whole thing. Don't just say like, you know, air and just leave it there. I say airborne, and I remember that it has an N. So N for N95 and N for negative pressure, okay? That's how I remember it. Hopefully that works for you. Okay. This is where we're going to leave off for today to keep it short and simple. I want to apologize for my previous videos not having audio. I think I have fixed the issue, and hopefully this time it works out. Good luck studying. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye, and happy holidays.